When Nadine Pruitt died on a Wednesday in early March, her daughter Cora had exactly 6 days to clear out the flower shop before the landlord changed the locks. The shop had been on Merchant Street in Harlow, Georgia for 31 years. A narrow building between a hardware store and a tax office, its front window painted with a wreath of morning glories that Nadine had put there herself with a stencil kit and 2 cans of paint. The summer Cora was 9. Nadine had run it alone for most of those years. Alone meaning without a partner, without a business manager, without anyone who understood why a woman with bad knees and a leaking roof over her workroom would turn down 3 separate offers to sell and retire somewhere warm. Cora had never understood it either. But she was here now, which was the only thing that mattered. And she had a rented cargo van parked crooked on the curb outside and a week to figure out what to do with 31 years of her mother's life. Her brother Drew had offered to help. He had said it on the phone, in the careful voice he used when he was offering something he hoped she would decline. He lived in Phoenix now with his wife Sandra, who had opinions about everything and expressed them early. When Cora said she could handle it, Drew said, "You sure?" And the relief in his voice was so plain she almost laughed. She had driven down from Knoxville the morning after the funeral with 2 suitcases, a box of contractor bags, and $43 in her checking account. The divorce had been finalized in November. The house had sold in January, and what was left after the mortgage and the lawyers had gone to Greg's back taxes, which she had not known about until the paperwork appeared on her kitchen table one afternoon, with a yellow sticky note that said, "Sorry, Cor." She was 48 years old and had no savings account, no lease in her name, and a Honda Civic with a transmission that made it sound like something had gotten stuck in it 2 winters ago and never left. She was staying in the back room of her mother's shop on a cot she had found under the stairs because she could not afford a motel. She had not told Drew that. She had not told anyone. If you're new to this channel, welcome, and stay with us, because what Cora Pruitt found inside this flower shop is the kind of thing most people never get to see. And what she was about to learn about her mother is going to stay with you. The shop smelled the way it had always smelled. Cut stems and wet ribbon and the particular green smell of refrigerated flowers, cold and living and faintly sweet. The walk-in cooler had been turned off when Nadine went to the hospital the last time and never turned back on. The flowers inside had gone, but the smell had not. It was in the walls, in the wood of the work table where Nadine had spent 31 years with her hands in flowers and wire and foam. Cora stood in the doorway on the first morning and held onto the frame and breathed it, and did not move for a full minute. The shop was small. Front room with a glass counter and 2 refrigerated display cases. A chalkboard on the wall behind the register with the weekly specials written in Nadine's rounded hand. Seasonal arrangements start at $35. Sympathy and memorial always available. Custom orders welcome, just ask. Workroom in the back where the real labor happened. Storage closet off the workroom. The cot under the stairs, and the stairs going up to a half loft where Nadine had kept her files and her supply catalogs, and a battered recliner Cora recognized from the living room of her childhood home. She didn't know what the recliner was doing here. She had not known her mother kept a chair in the loft. She started with the front room because it was easier. She worked fast and without letting herself think, which was the only way she had ever gotten through hard things. She wrapped the display cases in moving blankets. She emptied the glass counter. She took down the dried arrangements from the wall hooks, the ones her mother had made as samples, some of them years old, preserved in the dry air of a Georgia winter. She boxed them carefully, even the ones that shed petals at a touch, because she could not make herself put them in a trash bag. In the center of the glass counter, she found the jar. It was a mason jar, the old-fashioned kind with a wide mouth, filled nearly to the brim with folded bills and loose change. On a strip of masking tape across the front, in her mother's handwriting, 3 words: for who needs, for who needs. Not for who needs it, not for the needy fund or the tip jar, or change for the register. For who needs. Cora held the jar and read those 3 words and did not move for a moment. Then she set it down carefully on the counter, in the exact center where it had been, and went back to work. She would come back to the jar. The workroom took most of the first day. 31 years of a working florist's tools and supplies filled every cabinet, every shelf, every drawer. Floral foam in 12 varieties. Paddle wire, corsage wire, stem wrap in 40 colors. Sheaves of ribbon Nadine had been too practical to throw away because there was always enough left for something. Cora folded and sorted and labeled and tried not to read the handwriting on the sticky notes Nadine had put on nearly everything. Good for small arrangements, ask before using, stretches. Dale's wife likes these, call first. She did not know who Dale was. She had not known her mother kept notes about her customers' wife does. It was late in the afternoon when she found the step stool pushed against the back wall of the storage closet. And above it, on the highest shelf, a gray metal lockbox she had to stand on her toes to reach. It was heavier than she expected. She set it down on the work table and looked at it. It was not padlocked. The latch was the kind that pressed down and opened. She pressed it, and the lid came up. Inside, a yellow legal pad, its pages covered in her mother's writing. A white envelope with Cora written across it in blue pen. A folded document, official-looking, with a name printed in the header she didn't recognize. A second envelope, thicker, rubber-banded shut. And underneath all of it, a photograph she had never seen. Her mother at maybe 35, standing in the front of this shop, laughing at something off-camera, in an apron that had paint on it. The morning glory wreath just finished behind her on the glass. Nadine had not been a woman who laughed easily. Or so Cora had always believed. She picked up the envelope with her name on it. Her hands were not steady. Stay with us. Because what Nadine Pruitt had been doing for 31 years inside this narrow building on Merchant Street, what her daughter was about to learn, is the kind of story that makes you put your phone down and sit very still. She opened the yellow legal pad first, because it was the thing her hands reached for before her mind caught up. The first page was dated nearly 20 years ago. The writing was smaller then, tighter, the handwriting of a younger woman. February 8, girl came in for a funeral arrangement. Didn't have enough. Made her the arrangement anyway and told her to pay next time. She never did. That's fine. That was never what it was about. She turned the page. March 15. Old man widower, comes in every week for one stem of something yellow. His wife liked yellow, he told me that. He never asks the price. I never charge him what it costs. He pays what he pays and I call it even and we don't discuss it. June 2, a woman who hasn't slept. I could see it the way you can see it in someone's hands. She needed white roses for her daughter's wedding, and she kept apologizing for taking my time, because she wasn't sure about the count, and I told her she was not taking my time. She was the reason I open up in the morning. She cried a little. I pretended not to notice. Sometimes the kindest thing is to look away. Cora turned pages. There were hundreds of entries, years of them. Not a business ledger. There was no money recorded, no inventory, no profit and loss, just people. A name or a description, a date, and what her mother had done. An arrangement made it cost for a family whose house had burned. A standing order of sunflowers delivered every Monday to the nursing home on Dalton Road, never billed. The elderly woman on Pine Street whose husband had died in the fall, who came in every Friday not to buy anything, just to be somewhere that smelled like living things, and whom Nadine had let sit in the one chair in the front room for as long as she needed. She never buys a thing. One entry read, and she is my best customer. Cora set the legal pad down. Through the front window the lights on Merchant Street had come on, the pale orange of the street lamps at dusk. Somewhere down the block a door opened and closed. A car moved past, slow on the wet road. And here, in the cooling quiet of her mother's workroom, she sat with a book that was 30 years of a kindness, so private it had never been spoken aloud. She had not known. That was the thing that kept landing on her. The thing she kept having to absorb from a new angle. She had grown up 20 minutes from this shop. She had helped her mother unload boxes on weekends when she was in high school. She had stood at this work table and learned to wire a corsage and tie a ribbon the way you tie it when you mean it. And she had never known that the mason jar on the counter was not a tip jar, and that her mother had been keeping these pages, and that the narrow building between the hardware store and the tax office was doing something other than selling flowers. She opened the white envelope with her name on it. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on her mother's stationery, the kind with a small blue iris in the corner that she had ordered in batches from a printer in Savannah. Dear Cora, if you found the box, I'm gone, and you're sitting in my workroom wondering what on earth I was up to. That's fair. I should have told you a long time ago. But every time I thought about it, it seemed like bragging. And I am your grandmother's daughter, too much to brag about anything. You're probably also wondering why I never retired. Mr. Bellows from the bank asked me every time I came in, and I always said the same thing. The shop is still teaching me something. He thought that was eccentric. Maybe it was. But it was true. I want to tell you about a woman named Patrice who came in my second year in business. She was maybe 40, which means she was younger then than you are now. She came in the week before her daughter's first birthday and asked what a small arrangement would run her. I told her. She counted what was in her wallet and it wasn't enough. And her face did what a person's face does when they're about to ask for something and are terrified of the asking. I told her I had a surplus that morning and that I was going to put something together for her out of what I had extra, and she could pay whatever was fair. She paid $2 and I watched her carry those flowers out to her car, and I sat down on the step stool in the back room and thought, this is what the shop is for. That was the first time I understood it. The shop was never just a shop. Cora stopped. She read the next paragraph and her throat tightened. I know things have been hard for you this past year. Drew told me a little. I know you'd never tell me yourself because you've been protecting me from worry. Since you were 6 years old and you put on a sweater when you were cold, so I wouldn't feel guilty about the heating bill. You were always the one who handled things quietly and let everyone else take the credit. I see you, Cora. I have always seen you. There's a trust document in the box, and you need to read it carefully. The shop isn't rented. I bought the building 11 years ago, when the owner retired and offered it to me before it went to market. I paid cash from the account I'd been keeping since year 3. Drew doesn't know about the account. He doesn't know about the building. He knows I owned a flower shop. He never asked what that meant. I'm leaving it to you. Not to sell, though if you need to sell and there's no other way, you have my blessing, and I mean that. But first I want you to read what I've been doing, and I want you to see what it could be, and then I want you to decide. The building is worth something now that it wasn't before. Main Street revitalization, they're calling it. The city assessor says somewhere around 280. Drew will hear about it, and Drew will have thoughts. He always does. He is a good man in the way that a person can be a good man while looking right past what's in front of him. I love him. I'm not asking you to fight with him. I'm just asking you to know what the building is before he gets to tell you what it's worth. There's one more thing. At the back of the workroom, behind the supply cabinet, there is a small door that doesn't have a handle. You have to press it at the left side to open it. Go look at what's in there before you read anything else. Cora lowered the letter. She looked at the supply cabinet. She went to it, moved it enough to slide behind it, and found the door her mother had described. She pressed the left side. It opened on a hinge into a space about the size of a large closet. A room, really, with a low ceiling and a bare concrete floor and a single bulb on a pull cord. She pulled the cord. Along both walls, floor to ceiling, shelves, and on the shelves, organized with the same precision her mother brought to everything, supplies. Baby items, formula, diapers, wipes in every size. Canned goods, sorted by type, blankets, folded. Coats sized and labeled in her mother's hand, small, large, child, medium, large, a box of school supplies, 3 pairs of winter boots, children's lined up in a row. On the shelf nearest the door, a spiral notebook, the kind from a drugstore. Cora opened it. It was an inventory. Every item on every shelf, logged in her mother's hand. At the top of the first page, underlined, replenish before January. Check children's sizing September. At the bottom of the last page with writing on it, a single note added recently. The ink still looking fresh. Cora will know what to do with this. Cora sat down on the concrete floor of her mother's hidden room and held the notebook against her chest, and made a sound she had not made since the hospital. She did not know. She had not known about any of it. If you're still here, do us a favor and hit subscribe, because Drew Pruitt is about to find out what his mother left, and what he does next is the part of this we've been building toward. The call from Drew came on the 3rd morning. He had seen, he said, a property record online. He'd been looking into estate matters, he said, and the family home in Harlow wasn't the only asset, was it? You knew about the building? She said. I know about it now. Why didn't you tell me? I found out 2 days ago. Drew Cora. He used the patient voice, the one that meant he had already decided what the right answer was. A commercial property in a revitalization district. Do you have any idea what that could be worth right now? Sandra looked it up and she says, I know what it's worth. Then you know we need to talk about this. Mom's estate goes through probate, that means both of us, and if there's a building and an account nobody knew about, there's a trust. Silence. What kind of trust? The kind where she decided what happened to it before she died. Drew, she planned this. She had a lawyer and a document, and she did it 11 years ago. You can call the firm, it's Greer and Associates on Callaway. They'll tell you. The line was quiet for long enough that she heard his wife's voice in the background, low and asking. The building should have been part of the estate discussion, Drew said finally. If she had assets nobody disclosed, she disclosed them to the trust. She disclosed them to the person she wanted to handle them. You, another silence. That's not, he stopped. Started again. I want to talk to the attorney. Call them, Cora said. Tell them Drew Pruitt, Nadine's son. They'll be ready for you. She hung up and her hand was steady, and that steadiness surprised her. She had spent her whole marriage apologizing for taking up space. She had spent the last year apologizing for the divorce, for the house, for the money, for the way things had gone wrong in ways that were not entirely or even mostly her fault. She had apologized so many times and so thoroughly that she had nearly forgotten what it felt like to say a true thing in a level voice and mean every word. She felt it now. She went back to the workroom and picked up the legal pad again and kept reading. The attorney from Greer & Associates called her that afternoon. His name was Henderson, and he spoke with the measured calm of a man who had been expecting this call since the estate was filed. He told her what her mother had set up. The building was held in trust, with Cora as sole trustee. The account, 31 years of deposits, never more than 100 at a time, often much less, came to just over $41,000, designated for the continuation of what the trust documents called the work of this shop, which Henderson defined, reading directly from her mother's language, as the provision of flowers, goods, and quiet assistance to those in need, without application, without announcement, and without making any person feel the weight of receiving. She was very specific about that last part, Henderson said. She came back to that language more than once over the years. She said, and I'm quoting her notes here, that the hardest thing to give a person isn't food or money, it's dignity, and that the shop had been practicing that for 30 years and she wanted it to practice it for 30 more. Cora held the phone and did not say anything. She also left a note in the file. Henderson said, to be read to you if the trust was ever challenged. He paused. Mr. Drew Pruitt's attorney contacted us this afternoon. Read it, Cora said. It says, tell her that everything I didn't say out loud, I put in the room behind the cabinet. Tell her the coat that fits her is the gray wool one, third shelf left side. I've been saving it 2 years. Cora closed her eyes. She breathed. All right, she said. Tell me what I need to do. The county hearing was held on a Thursday, in a room that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. 2 tables at the front, 6 rows of chairs behind. Cora sat at the left table with Henderson. Drew sat at the right table with his attorney, a man named Stafford who wore a good suit and spoke in complete sentences about diminished capacity and undisclosed assets and patterns of financial behavior, inconsistent with sound judgment. Cora looked at the rows of chairs behind her. They were full. She had not called anyone. She had not posted anything. She had not said a word to anyone beyond Henderson, and the handful of people who had come to the workroom door in the 3 days since. Word spread through Harlow that Nadine Pruitt's daughter was cleaning out the shop. But somehow they had come. The woman who'd brought 2 of her grandchildren and told Cora in the parking lot that Nadine had given her a funeral wreath when her husband died and refused payment and said only, let somebody do something for you, Lorene. Let it be this. The man in his 70s who'd come to the front door every October for 11 years with a $20 bill and said only for the shelves and left before she could ask his name. The girl, she was 20-something now, a girl in Cora's memory, who had worked at the tax office next door and who had come in once, shaking, needing something for a sick mother's birthday. And Nadine had sent her out with an armful of peonies and a bag of soup cans from the back room and told her the flowers were a sample, going to waste anyway, and that the soup was left over from a delivery that never got picked up. 2 lies so kindly told that the girl had been 6 blocks away before she understood they were lies. The woman who had sat in the front room chair every Friday for almost 2 years, because it smelled like living things, and she was learning, slowly, to want to stay in the world. She sat in the second row with her hands folded and looked straight ahead. Drew's attorney made his argument. The judge listened. Henderson presented the medical records, the annual reviews, the 11 years of trust documents signed in Nadine's hand, clear and unambiguous right up to the month she died. Then he asked the room. They came forward one at a time, and they did not talk about legal standing or estate valuation. They talked about a woman who kept a jar on her counter and never explained it, who left the light on in the workroom window on winter nights because she said it helped her see to close up. But everyone on Merchant Street knew that the light meant the back door was unlocked, and you could knock and she would answer. The old man with the $20 bill stood up and said he had never known her to do a careless thing in 30 years, and he would testify to that under any oath anyone wanted. The woman from the front room chair stood up and said simply, "She knew I was struggling, and she never made me feel small for it. That is not the act of a woman who didn't know what she was doing." The young woman who was not so young anymore stood up and said, "I had $14 and she gave me peonies. She knew exactly what she was doing. She always did." The judge reviewed the documents. She looked at the room. She dismissed the challenge inside 40 minutes. Drew stood when the ruling came. He was not looking at Stafford. He was looking at the people in the rows behind him, people who had spoken about his mother for an hour, describing a woman he had known the name of and the face of and nothing else about. He stood very still for a long moment. Then he picked up his jacket and walked toward the door, and he had to pass the whole length of the seated row, and when he reached the end where Cora was standing, he stopped. He didn't say anything right away. "I didn't know," he said finally. It was not an excuse. It was just the truth of it, stated plainly, by a man who had been hearing it repeated for an hour in other people's voices and had finally found it in his own. "I know," Cora said. He nodded once and walked out. His wife, she noticed, was not in the room. Spring came in through the shop window on a morning in late April, the kind of morning that makes you believe in things again. The morning glory on the glass. Cora had touched it up with a small brush, and the same forest green as the original, caught the early light, and threw a faint pattern across the floor. The shop was different and the same. Cora had kept everything her mother kept that still worked and cleared out what had given out. The walk-in cooler hummed again, repaired by a man named Otto, who had been her mother's repairman for 20 years, and who had charged her half his rate without saying so, and let her pay the rest over 3 months. The chalkboard still said what Nadine had last written, because Cora was not ready to change it yet, and then she was, and when she finally picked up the chalk she wrote, in her own handwriting, the same words in the same order, because there was nothing more accurate to say. She had moved out of the cot and into the apartment above the supply room on the 2nd floor, the half-loft she'd thought was just storage, which turned out to be a real if small living space, a room and a half with a kitchenette and a window over Merchant Street. Her mother had slept here sometimes. She understood now, on the late nights when it wasn't worth driving home. Cora had been sleeping here herself for 6 weeks when she realized she had stopped thinking of it as temporary. She put the mason jar back on the counter, relined with a fresh strip of masking tape. She had changed the words slightly. Her mother's said, "For who needs." Cora's said, "For who needs, everyone does sometimes." People found it quickly. Old customers who had known about the jar for years began dropping their change again. New customers asked. Cora told them what it was for, simply without ceremony. Some people put in a 5 and some people took out a 20, and nobody said a word about the taking, which was exactly the way her mother had always handled it. The room behind the cabinet she restocked twice in those first weeks. A woman from the church on Greer Street, who had known Nadine for decades, appeared at the back door one morning with 2 laundry bags full of children's winter things, sorted by size. Cora opened the door and let her in and showed her the shelves, and the woman stood there a moment and said, "Lord, Nadine, you organized heaven too, didn't you?" Drew called on a Wednesday in May, not his wife's number, his own. He said he'd been going through some of their mother's things that had come to him from the house, the things Cora had packed and shipped, the boxes of photographs and paperwork and small ordinary items from a life. He had found, he said, a letter, a short one in an envelope with his name on it. He did not read it to her, and she did not ask him to. She wrote that she knew I'd find out about the building and the account, he said. She wrote that she understood why I'd think it was unfair. He stopped. She wrote that she hoped, after a while, I'd come to see it wasn't about fair, that she just needed someone to keep the lights on and I was always better at other things. He paused again, and the pause cost him something. She put a check in the envelope, he said. $500, she wrote, for the jar. Don't argue about it. Cora sat very still. I'm sending it, Drew said. I'm not arguing. She said all right? He said all right. He did not say he was sorry, and she did not ask him to, and that would come later or it wouldn't. But he had called from his own phone on a Wednesday in May, and for now that was the beginning of something. The morning she officially called the shop open again. No announcement, no sign. Just the door unlocked at 8, and the light on. She stood behind the counter and looked at what her mother had built, and left her and thought about a woman named Patrice who had come in with $2. and left with an armful of flowers and never known that she had changed the direction of 31 years. A bell above the door gave a single clear note. A woman came in. She was young, maybe 25, in a jacket too thin for the morning, with the face of someone who had been driving for a while without a destination. She looked at the flowers in the cases and the jar on the counter and the chalkboard, and then she looked at Cora. "Are you open?" she said. "We are," Cora said. I'm not sure what I can spend. I just wanted to get something. For myself, just something small. I haven't." She stopped. "It's been a hard few months." Cora came around the counter. "Come pick something out," she said. "Whatever you like. We'll make it work." She watched the young woman move slowly along the cooler cases, studying each arrangement with a seriousness that had nothing to do with price. And she thought about her mother standing in this same spot, watching a different woman make the same slow consideration of what small beautiful things she could allow herself. She thought about the legal pad and the mason jar and the room behind the cabinet, and the coat on the third shelf that fit her exactly, that her mother had been setting aside for 2 years on the chance that she would come. She thought about 31 years of a woman who had run a flower shop the way most people only dream of living, quietly, completely, without once asking for credit. The young woman turned from the cooler holding a bunch of pale yellow tulips, the cheapest thing in the case, and looked at Cora with an expression that was ready to apologize. "Those are a good choice," Cora said. "Yellow means you're glad to be here." She wrapped them in brown paper with a sprig of eucalyptus and a length of twine, and she tied the knot the way her mother had taught her, the kind you tie when you mean it. And she handed them over and named a price that was not what they cost. And when the woman left and the bell gave its single note and the door swung shut on the April morning, Cora stood alone in her mother's shop. Her shop now, in a space that smelled like cut stems and green cold and 31 years of a love expressed entirely in small, unconditional acts. And she felt something let go in her chest that she had been holding since November. She went to the window. The morning glories on the glass caught the light. She turned the small lamp on in the corner, the one her mother had kept burning in the workroom window on winter nights, so that anyone on Merchant Street who knew what it meant would know the back door was open. It was April and not winter, and the lamp didn't matter the same way. But Cora left it on anyway. It was the kind of thing you keep doing once you understand why it was started.